Everyone had Higgs as the favorite to win solo grand finals, and in a last game situation, that pressure has gotten to him before, but Higgs was ready this time. But this story starts a little bit further back than that. Back in Chapter 6 Season 2, Higgs and his trio of Clicks and Iamzo were just coming off the back of a third place in FNCS Major 1 this year, where they really weren't expected to do so well in FNCS. They were now one of the top dogs on NA Central, and were able to choose a really strong drop spot for Chapter 6 Season 2. Lone Wolf Lair. This drop spot was really strong, as not only did it have a vault in the POI itself, but the vault had a ton of gold and really good access to a nearby black market. This black market was really strong and allowed them to buy multiple stacks of gold splashes, which were really important for movement alongside the kneecapper item that season. After the first 4 divisional cups of the season, it was clear that Peterbot, Cold, and Ritual were the clear favorites for FNCS, as they won all 4 tournaments, but there was also a clear second favorite. Clicks, Higgs, and Iamzo placed 4th, 3rd, 2nd, and 2nd in the first 4 divisional cups, and in the final div cup of the season, they won, beating out Peterbot's team. It really felt like Higgs' team had a real chance at challenging Peterbot going into Grands, especially since it really seemed like they had the best POI going into the Major 2 finals after multiple updates. On day 1 of Major 2 finals, Higgs, Clicks, and Iamzo played the day really well, where they started the finals tied with Peterbot, Cold, and Ritual on 310 points after 4 games, and got a huge win in Game 5, putting him 37 points ahead of Peterbot's team. But to end the day, Peterbot, Cold, and Ritual pushed Higgs' team and chased them all around the map. They were all separated, and who else but Peterbot himself would end up killing Higgs here in the final game ahead of day 2. Pete's team would end up going on to get a 13 kill 6th, putting him over 50 points ahead of Clicks, Higgs, and Iamzo going into day 2. This tournament wasn't over yet though. Higgs, Clicks, and Iamzo clawed their way back over day 2 by sticking to their game plan and making it deep in every single endgame. And going into game 12, they were only 35 points behind Peterbot's team, a tough but closable gap. While Higgs had gotten second in an FNCS before this with his old teammate Rapid, he was only able to play 11 games that tournament. Higgs had been here before, but not really. This was the first time that a major came down to a last game situation like this. But in game 12, it looked like Higgs, Clicks, and Iamzo were going to take it to Peterbot as they pushed towards Crime City, but the teams didn't actually end up fighting here. Higgs' team had the chance to gamble on themselves and try and end the tournament here, but they didn't. Later in the game, Higgs, Clicks, and Iamzo got into a mid-game fight, as they needed a big game with a lot of kills in order to keep up with Pete's team here since they didn't kill them in the mid-game. They manage to take down the trio they're fighting, but Clicks gets knocked and starts to lose HP in the storm. So Higgs goes to Chug Splash him and he accidentally pops his big pot, and Clicks bleeds out in the storm. With all of the pressure in the world on him, Higgs makes a simple mistake that a player as good as him would almost never make. Every quad edit and aim training exercise you practice doesn't prepare you for a moment like this. Higgs could have saved Clicks here, which would have improved their odds at winning, but the pressure got to him. Peterbot's team noticed this and they smelled blood. They pushed into zone deep into the endgame to fight Higgs and Iamzo, and this happened.
Iamzo, they're ready to take it by force right now because the fight. Peterbot has to backtrack. He needs the surge. He needs it here, and this is the nearest team to them. Ritual turning around, trying to backtrack, but down goes Peterbot. That is their elimination. Look at the heals. Look at the loot that Higgs now has in his inventory. And the siphon just kicked a bit longer. Cole's fallen to the surge here. Oh no! Storm takes him down. First place is starting to be dismantled. Ritual tries, but he is sent back to the lobby. It's not over yet though. Higgs and Iamzo still have to earn some points. Player on the outskirts. There's knock body everywhere, Jacob. Oh no! It's a 5-tick! And they fall.
Both teams went down, with Peterbot's team only 11 points ahead. Now, given any grand finals, there are hundreds of mistakes that could have resulted in your team getting a couple more points. But in the last game with everything on the line, a poor mistake like this stings like nothing else. After this tournament, it really felt like Higgs' trio had started to fall apart. All of the momentum they had built seemed to crumble. Going into Major 3, Higgs, Clicks, and Iamzo had their POI of choice uncontested, but just weren't able to put it together. In a meta where players were trading damage for Storm Surge, they tried to W key and lurk on opponents to get kills, but just weren't able to do it. They clearly were in their heads about needing to win Major 3 and play aggressive, and had a go big or go home mentality, and even if the skill was there, the mental toughness was not. They placed 8th coming out of Supernova Academy, while Chino, Fredoxy, and Pablo Wingu placed 1st in Major 3 out of Supernova on EU, showing that it was certainly possible to win out of this POI. And Peterbot's trio went on to win Major 3 in maybe the most ridiculous fashion of all time. Higgs' trio also dudded at Globals, placing 18th, but nobody from NA performed up to their standards at Globals, with Peterbot's trio trio placing 15th as they were triple contested, Poyo's trio placing 16th despite having Demon's Domain, one of the best POIs uncontested. But we saw the mental weakness from Higgs' trio again. They were in 8th place, less than 100 points away from 2nd going into day 2, and they so desperately wanted to win that they stopped playing to their game plan and started playing aggressive on day 2, causing them to fall 10 whole places. Going into duos though, things started to look a little bit different. Higgs and Clix decided to stay together for duos after globals, and their placements slowly started to improve over time. They were starting to get their mojo back to end chapter 6 and going into chapter 7, and Peterbot and Poyo's placements started strong after globals, but it started to waver over time. It looked like the cracks were starting to show. What made Peterbot and Poyo so ridiculously good over the past 2 years had been their ridiculous commitment to the game, where they would consistently put 10 or more hours each day in. But they had started to grind less, especially Peterbot, while Higgs and Clix were consistently grinding even if there weren't any important tournaments on until 2026. This was also going into the first solo series, a set lobby solo tournament that culminated over the course of 6 weeks of qualifiers, where Peterbot and Higgs had both qualified for finals. These two players were the favorites to do well going into the tournament, as Higgs had been consistently improving his placements and a really good solos player, and well, Peterbot is Peterbot. Would this finally be the tournament where Higgs proves he should be in conversations for the best player on NA and is able to perform under pressure to win a finals? It wasn't looking very like that after the first 5 games, where Peterbot was 67 points ahead of Higgs, who was in 2nd place going into the final game of the tournament. Even though Pete had been losing motivation, he had basically played a perfect tournament up until this point, and Higgs would need a huge game to win. Going into the final game of the tournament, Game 6, Peterbot left Rangers rest early, where he had previously been playing Storm and then launch padded to Zone as he wanted to ensure that he didn't get pushed and griefed by staying there for too long. This ended up almost costing him the tournament though, as he almost goes down in the mid game and has essentially nothing, and he has to go back into Rangers rest to heal and farm back up. Peterbot is able to squeak out a 2-kill 16th, but all eyes were on Higgs at this point.
Nipping at his heels, but Higgs has the lead. 6 builds left. 3 eliminations for Higgs is playing great. Higgs looking a bit scuffed though. 7 builds, no white heals. The siphons ran out. He's only got 10 shield to work with right now. And Higgs looking very weak. 287 to 270. Higgs drops down, gets the Elim though. 5 eliminations. Higgs ends up falling. Is it to Bolt? It's to Bolt.
A 5-kill 5th. An incredible last game for sure, but not enough to finish above Peterbot. Higgs wouldn't have been able to win the tournament even if he had survived and killed all of the remaining players. And again, Pete is out of reach for Higgs. Higgs played a phenomenal tournament and did about everything he could in the final game to catch up to Peterbot, but still finishes in 2nd place. Something was different about this tournament though. Higgs clearly didn't crumble under pressure this time and had an incredible effort to win the tournament at the last second. The trend of Higgs placements continued to improve throughout the start of Chapter 7, where it really started to seem like Clix and Higgs were the best duo since they just kept winning tournaments. There was one critique though, that most of these tournaments were victory cups or performance eval cups. But they still undeniably looked the strongest, and Higgs was IGLing and looked like the best player on NA currently. At the same time while all this has been happening, Peterbot had been losing interest in the game and not grinding. The best in the world was barely queuing and talking about how he didn't like the game and was demotivated. This is all leading up to the most recent solo series tournament. The chance for Higgs to get his revenge on Peterbot was finally here, with another major solo set lobby tournament. Higgs and Peterbot both qualified for the heats of the solo series finals, but Peterbot didn't queue for 3 of the 6 games in heats and wasn't able to make it through to the finals. It does seem like if Pete played all 6 games, he probably would have made it through, but this lack of effort from Peterbot opened the door for Higgs in finals. Higgs dropped in Wonkyland, or I guess Cartman Land, but I'm just gonna call it Wonky Land since that's what everyone calls it, and went through to the finals in only 1 game. Higgs and Clix were going to split Wonky Land, the best POI in the game in finals, and Higgs was everyone's favorite to win the tournament. But was he going to let this pressure of potentially challenging for the title of the best player on NA Central get to his head, or was he going to show up when all of the lights were on him? On the first day of finals, as expected, Higgs lands at Wonkyland. What makes Wonkyland so good is the target practice game here, where you get a ton of loot when you shoot the targets and can play the game multiple times, and this was on Higgs' side of the POI. By boxing himself in here, he guarantees the loot for himself while being able to block off any players trying to lurk on him. Because of this, Higgs consistently had strong loot going into the mid game, but his mats weren't very good at this point. See, with the new Storm Surge mechanic, where it is the net of the damage you deal minus the damage you take, just dealing 0 tags and taking 0 tags will often get you through the first few zones of Surge, so Higgs just sits in Storm to farm up his mats. There was also another player besides Clix at Wonkyland to start the tournament, so Higgs had to pay attention to him them as well when farming. As long as he remained aware of his surroundings and kept enough white heals, he was able to sit and storm, and could also use any gold he saved up in case he needed more shield to carry or white heals. When he rotates to zone after getting his mats up, he looks again to tank zone and hit the vending machine. But another player who is really weak looks to push him for surge damage and siphon since he was so low. Higgs doesn't panic and pops a slurp, and simply holds an angle for a pre-fire where the opponent opens up and instantly gets shot for a quick kill. Higgs makes it into zone with 210 damage above surge and caps off his HP with the chug jug, and the half in half out zone pulls pretty close to him. He rotates it on foot and boxes up. For the next zone, Higgs already has his wingsuit planned out and just waits till he hears another wingsuiter going so he isn't the first, and lands on top of the tree here so he falls off and spends less time vulnerable in the wingsuit gliding animation. Higgs wingsuits again for the next rotate here, but now he looks up so he can glide as long as possible, allowing him to rotate the whole moving zone with one wingsuit and save a lot of mats. He is starting to run low on mats and sees a refresh which he starts to build toward. This is a crucial play for him, as another player, Dulzier, goes for the refresh but doesn't build before going for the loot, allowing Higgs to box him and the loot. And while Higgs pressures Dulzier and he gets out, Higgs got what really mattered, which was about 500 mats, setting him up with near game-winning loot. Higgs tarps to zone and is able to pick up a refresh onto Chris since he is so aware of what is around him. Higgs continues to rotate on foot, and he is really good about changing elevations here, as that allows him to move quicker on the opponent's screen, making him a more difficult target. When he starts to run low on mats, he puts himself on a layer where a lot of players with low health or no mats are likely to be, and is able to find a refresh on the reds. Again, he drops down and changes elevations, and then drops to low ground with low mats and runs into the building to gain a couple more crucial mats. He trades with Shadow, where both of them are super weak, but he knows that he can outlast Shadow and Storm, and just holds his shotgun out at his own wall. Shadow would need to break through the wall to make it his own, and Higgs can just react and shoot him, not needing to edit the wall to potentially reveal himself to a pre-fire. Higgs goes down here, but this first game put him into 4th place, a great way to start the tournament. The next game didn't go as well though. He again tried to play Storm here, but got caught in a bad Storm fight while he was below Surge, and while he's able to get the kill, he goes down to Storm Sickness in a 5-tick, where he was just a few feet from making it into zone. He goes down in... well, you can read it. Another problem of this game is that the player who would be his closest competition, his old teammate Rapid, would go on to get a 5-kill win, shooting him into 2nd place, and Higgs fell out of the top 10. Higgs wasn't going to let a repeat of Game 2 happen again though this tournament, and in Game 3, he played his early game a little bit different. The player who contested him in clicks in Game 1 had stopped landing there, so he was able to farm up quickly and position on top of the hill to look for surge tags really early. After a few early tags to get a fair bit above surge, Higgs played Storm again until the 5-tick, where he pulls the half in, half out zone and has an easy on-foot rotate. He pulls zone again here, and rotates early while everyone is wingsuiting and looking back for tags to take a nice high layer. For the next zone, he pops a slurp and tanks some zone before rotating with the wingsuit. This is done again to make sure that eyes aren't on him when he rotates and that nobody will grief him on the backside of zone since they already had to move. Again, he floats around by looking up to skip the whole moving zone. Once again, Higgs pops a slurp and tanks zone before rotating all the way from the back to the front side of zone. Being able to make it into the end games like Higgs does with these slurps is so valuable, as you're able to wait longer for zone to move before rotating, allowing you to move really far in one motion. Higgs picks up a refresh here, and hears Scroll get hit for white HP on the back side of his box, and fully opens up, knowing that any trade here will result in a refresh for him. Higgs has game-winning loot now with incredible heals at this point in the game, and picks up another refresh here, but doesn't go for the loot. So many times, players will die when they go for a refresh and someone is waiting there to edit on them. So Higgs pops a slurp, tanks zone, and uses his momentum to get to the front side of zone. He now has so many mats, which allows him to build a ton of boxes to control space on the low ground, where he finds a kill onto Eulogy and Tyler. Higgs is stacked now with the Mythic Pump and Mythic Deadeye AR and 140 left on his Chug Jug, so he just plays his mats out knowing how important these top placement points are. He makes it to the final 1v1 and finds himself in an awkward situation where he farms the tree, then pops his Chug Jug to tank Storm before doing this. A 7-kill win, which shoots him into 2nd place, just 17 points behind Rapid in 1st, who got a 1-kill 12th that game. In Game 4, Higgs continues with his early and mid-game strategy of playing Storm and is able to get well above Surge. He makes it into the endgame again, but isn't quite as stacked as in the previous games. He makes this really clever rotate here where he wingsuits into the cliffside in zone and boxes up there. He knows that his white health is a resource he has in the same way that his builds are, and he uses this resource to get a high elevation in zone, which allows him to slide down for his next on-foot rotate, making it really quick. He is able to get to his old builds, where he finds G-Money in them trying to break out. He tags him once, and it's instead of trying to get the refresh as fast as possible so G-Money doesn't escape, he knows that he is in fully built hard mats that Higgs had built, so he takes his time, looks through the ramp, and headshots him. Higgs gets some more loot on the backside of zone by tanking some storm, but is in a pretty dire situation at this point. He notices Hari on his roof and edits him down for a quick kill, and accidentally wingsuits, putting him so far on the backside of zone and gets taken down in 17th when he tries to rotate in. Higgs was right near the top of the leaderboard here and accidentally wingsuits. Were we going to see a repeat of Chapter 6 Season 2 where he folds under pressure? On top of that, Rapid also ended up having another really good game, a 4-kill second, now putting him 42 points above Higgs. Again though, we saw Higgs step up in Game 5. He knew he needed a big game here. The zone pulled pretty close to Wonky Land in this game, so Higgs just based up with really good heals, got a few tags, and waited in Storm to wingsuit in right before the half-in, half-out zone, where he had a strong zone pull here. He wingsuits for the next 2 rotates, and for the second one, he hits a tree so he's able to build off the tree since these big redwood trees have build grids, allowing him to play a higher layer here and re-farm the tree for wood. He then does the slurp, tank zone, and wingsuit late strategy to safely rotate and skip the whole moving zone here. As I mentioned before, when Higgs rotates on foot here, he is always going up or down while moving forward, as he is harder to see when changing layers, and gets a good spot on the front of zone. He then uses this same strategy where he slides down to the front of zone to make the rotate as quickly and cheaply as possible. He gets a kill from tagging Jimity earlier, and tanks zone before getting to front side. He tanks Storm here in case there's a chance for the zone to pull back, but again, he uses his white health as a resource since he can stall having to rotate here. At this point though, he's out of mats, and he goes for the chop on bolts on height and pressures him until he can get the refresh and siphon. He's then able to find a drop down kill and can play height, and while he has the mat disadvantage here, he uses his health advantage to do this.
That was so good.
A 4-kill win. Surely, this is enough to beat Rapid's consistency, right? Nope. He was still down almost 20 points thanks to Rapid's 5th place that game, and Game 6 didn't end up going Higgs' way either, with a 0-kill 53rd place for a whopping 0 points, while Rapid had a 4-kill 5th place, lengthening the gap to 77 points. It really looked like Rapid's consistency was going to allow him to run away with this tournament. But unlike the first solo series, there was still a day 2 with 6 more games to be played. Was Higgs going to show up as the tournament favorite with the lights so bright in this moment? Well, the first game of day 2, Higgs came right out of the gates swinging. He pulled a decent zone to start, and played Storm until he wingsuits right before the half-in, half-out again, where he pulls another really good zone here. He got 3 picks with his AR going into the endgame, setting him up with really good materials and putting him well above Surge. He floats in the air with his wingsuit on rotate and literally circles around the zone before landing and boxing up. He again slurp wingsuits deep in zone and hits a tree to get down to the ground quicker. Here he is again changing elevations while moving constantly. You can see that Higgs has this solos meta down to a science. Again, he slurp wingsuits and gets siphoned from Reciprocal, who he tagged earlier in zone. Higgs has put himself in an incredible situation with so many mats from using his slurps to tank zone and is able to create so much space compared to the other players where he finds an easy refresh. Again, his space allows him to force Epic Will to the outskirts of zone with nowhere to go, creating that easy opening. Higgs full tarps to zone here with his mats and doesn't look to force a kill, and in the final 1v1 this happens.
No! He was 1. Okay.
In the final 1v1 with the advantage, he goes down to Acorn. He should have won this one, and was he going to let this mistake get to him? On the bright side though, Rapid only got a 22nd place, putting Higgs only 35 points behind Rapid going into Game 8. Game 8 and 9 went pretty well for Higgs with a 16th place and a 30th place, and while these weren't huge pop-off games, he was back within 20 points of Rapid going into Game 10, although he did fall down into 3rd with Bolts now in competition. In Game 10, Higgs pulls a good zone here, and is able to get 400 above Surge from players rotating into the Wonky Land area where he is based up. Higgs is able to tank Storm in the 2-tick for even more tags with the Surge threshold going up, and wingsuits in late as normal. He makes it into the endgame, and multiple times he tanks zone with his wingsuit to make the rotations. Higgs plays out his mats perfectly this game. He doesn't need a refresh the whole time to get a 12th place here. This game puts Higgs 8 points ahead of Rapid, who went down in 40th in this game. In Game 11, Higgs gets a mid-game kill to get his Surge and is set up for the endgame. He picks up 3 more kills this game and finishes in 18th place, and at this point, he was only 6 points ahead of Rapid going into the final game. This was it. Higgs could prove that he wasn't just a Victory Cup warrior and that he really was the best player on NA Central this season. All of his hard work and grinding came down to this game. Would he show up in the final game that decides everything or fold under the pressure?
You sound as though you're feeling the pressure.
I'm not feeling the pressure, no. You cannot put pressure on me. No chance. No chance.
Going into Game 12, Wonkyland was surprise contested by Montana, and Montana and Clicks actually ended up trading, leaving all of Wonkyland to be uncontested for Higgs. So Higgs is able to make it into the endgame very stacked after playing his normal early game plan for the most part, and he pulls the half in, half out zone. He's able to tag Wingsuiters, putting him over 200 above Surge, and pops an extra slurp juice for some protection when he rotates into the next zone. He's looking for Surge, and then I Am Enough flew into his box and almost took him out, almost ending the tournament right there, but Higgs gets out in time. This did mess up his game a lot though. He had to pop a lot of heals and lost a lot of Surge, but is able to make it in mostly intact. But then, in the kill feed, Rapid goes down. That seems to be the tournament. Or was it? See, there was a player who was sneaking up the leaderboard on day 2, who had gotten a 5th, 2nd, 5th, and 4th already that day, and he was right on Higgs' tail. And that player was one of the best solo players of all time, Muzz. Muzz was only 41 points behind Higgs going into Game 12, but he was averaging far more than that on the day, so Higgs would have to clutch up hard here. At this point, he's barely above Surge, but he doesn't panic here and tags Wingsuiters to get back above the threshold. He then wingsuits and floats around, going for this tactic even with all the marbles on the line. Higgs wingsuits again and gets tagged, but makes it to the front side of zone. He's down to 6 builds with 15 left while Muzz is tearing through the lobby. If he dies here, he could easily lose the tournament. He makes it to zone and is down to 0 builds and sneaks into old builds and finds a crucial kill on the causers. He has builds now, top 9. He gets a tag on the Shadow and tanks zone down to 10 HP before going down to Curly. But who else would be dominating on the high ground but Muzz? Muzz takes down Shadow and it goes to the final 1v1.
On the region, but only in Victory Cups. He's already proven that he can hold his own in set lobbies.
$2,000 here. That's essentially what he's playing for, having to catch up on the Rapid, but back-to-back eliminations here in a 1v1 against Curly. He has the materials, he has the siphon, he has a full advantage, having Curly trapped in the water, but it's Curly who gets the best of Muzz, leaving points on the board. But did Muzz do enough?
Higgs finally did it. He won a solo set lobby finals, and after this, it is getting more and more difficult to say he isn't the best player on NA Central right now. But obviously, the real test will be when both Higgs and Peterbot make a set lobby finals of the next really important tournament. The first World Cup Reload Qualifier Finals is a little under 2 weeks from now, and Major 1 for FNCS is around the corner too. And we will really start to get the answer to the question, can Peterbot defend the belt, or has the challenger Higgs taken the throne from the GOAT himself? That being said, you can't fault Higgs for Peterbot not making finals, and going by current form, it is certainly possible that Higgs would have just won the finals regardless if Peterbot played. If you enjoyed this kind of video, let me know in the comments below, or use my supporter creator code WMJack in the item shop, as that really helps me make more of these videos, as this video alone took me like 50 hours to make. And if you are interested in the greatest FNCS finals in Fortnite history, click the video on screen.